জি, জি, জি স্যার। জি, জি স্যার, তা তো অবশ্যই স্যার। জি, জি, জি স্যার। এনভায়রনমেন্ট থেকে ইন্ডাস্ট্রি থেকে থাকবেন, তারপর হচ্ছে এনভায়রনমেন্ট থেকে থাকবেন, ডিপার্টমেন্ট অফ থেকে। জি স্যার। জি স্যার। মানে যে এই যে স্যার প্লাস্টিক পলিউশন হচ্ছে, এটা তো স্যার আমাদের গ্লোবালি কাজ করা উচিত। এটা ট্রিটি চাচ্ছিলাম আমরা যে UNEA 5 এ যদি বাংলাদেশে পার্টিসিপেট করবে, যাতে এই বিষয়টার সাথে স্যার 4টার সময় 4টা থেকে শুরু হবে, আমরা 4টা 5 বা 10 থেকে শুরু করে দিব। মানে 5:30 পর্যন্ত স্যার। জি স্যার। না, না স্যার, উনি থাকবেন বলেছেন। জি, 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 জি স্যার। জি স্যার, বাইরে থেকে আমাদের যে আছে ইয়াগুলো রিপ্রেজেন্টেটিভ থাকবেন, CIEL থেকে, EI থেকে। তো স্যার আমাদেরকে আশা করছি ওনার প্রেজেন্টেশন দিবেন। জি স্যার। আসসালামু আলাইকুম। জি, জি। Assalamu alaikum, sir. We are gonna start our program, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to our honorable guests and distinguished panelists, guest speakers, and respected participants. I, Samina Khandakar, would like to take the opportunity to welcome you all to the high-level policy dialogue on the upcoming United Nations Environment Assembly UNEA 5.2 that will focus on the global agreement on marine litter and plastic pollution and how we can move towards the plastic treaty. I hope you are all doing well. It is to inform you that the meeting will be recorded. Also, we have gone live on Facebook. So I request you all kindly to share the live on your Facebook so we can reach maximum people. The United Nations Environment Assembly, UNEA, is the highest level decision-making body on the environment at the global level. It sets priorities for global environmental policies and develop international environmental law. At the third session of UNEA 3, the government established an ad hoc open-ended expert group to review different options to address the plastic pollution crisis. This year, in UNEA 5, we're hoping that delegates who will participate will propose a global agreement or a treaty that will help to stop plastic pollution. Today, in our webinar, we will discuss the need and importance of the Global Plastic Treaty, along with the opportunities it may offer. And that will start with a video that has been prepared for this occasion.
UNEA is a historic moment in the history of environment.
Indeed, by taking profits of nature-based solutions, we can vastly improve human well-being and prosperity.
It's expected to be attended by high-level delegations from over 160 UN member and observer states.
So I commend the delegates gathered today for your commitment to ending our environmental ills. This is a critical year to reset our relationship with nature. Following this important environment assembly, UN member states will gather to address biodiversity loss, chemical pollution, ocean health, desertification, and of course, climate disruption. All these events are opportunities to increase ambition and action. You have a busy year ahead. You have a great responsibility to articulate the environmental dimension of sustainable development. Governments and people need to understand in their very DNA that all environmental, social, and economic challenges are interlinked, and they must be tackled together.
So I hope you all have liked the video. Now, before we begin with our discussion session, on behalf of ESDO, it is my honor to welcome our today's event chief guest, Mohammad Shahabuddin MP, Sir, Honorable Minister, Sir, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, MOEFCC, Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. Sir, thank you so much for being with us today. And it's also my privilege to welcome our special guest, High Excellency, Mr. Ito Naoki, sir, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, Embassy of Japan in Bangladesh. A warm welcome from us to you, sir. It is also my pleasure to welcome our guest of honor, Mohammad Munirujjaman, sir, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Furthermore, I would like to welcome our respected participants. Mohammad Abdul Samad sir, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Water Resource. Mohammad Jiaul Haq sir, Director, Department of Environment. Dr. Abdullah Al Mamun sir, Deputy Director, Department of Environment. Mr. Tim Grabil sir, Attorney and Environmental Lawyer, Environmental Investigation Agency, EIA, United Kingdom. Mr. David Azzoli sir, Geneva Managing Attorney, Environmental Health Program Director, Center for International Environmental Law, CIEL, Geneva, Switzerland. Mr. Steve Fletcher sir, Director of Revolution Plastics, University of Portsmouth, United Kingdom. Anna Mi Dauditor, Coordinator, Mukuru Community Justice Center, based in Nairobi. Besides, we have our academicians present with us, Dr. Jakia Parvin Madam, Professor, Department of Soil, Water and Environment, University of Dhaka. Dr. Malik Akram Hussain sir, Professor, Department of Geography and Environment, Jagannath University. Ms. Zelina Sultana Madam, Assistant Professor, Department of Law, Jagannath University. Dr. Dilip Kumar Dotto sir, Professor, Department of Environmental Science, Khulna University. Dr. Mohammad Jahir bin Alam, Professor, Shahjalal University of Science and Technology. Besides, I welcome our journalist guests who've been with us today. Thank you so much. Now, at this moment, I would like to cordially welcome our former Secretary of Government of People's Republic of Bangladesh and Chairperson of ESDO, Syed Markub Murshid sir, and would like to request him to kindly inaugurate the event and welcome our guests and participants formally.
Thank you, Sabina. Honorable Minister in charge of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of Bangladesh, His Excellency, the Ambassador of Japan in Bangladesh, Ambassador Naoki, officials of the Government of Bangladesh, representatives of the universities of Bangladesh, representatives of the media in Bangladesh, our panel discussants, our guest speakers, our resource persons, my ESDO comrades, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to welcome you all to this webinar, this high-level policy dialogue on marine litter and plastic pollution. This webinar precedes the holding of the meeting, the biennial session of the United Nations Environment Agency, UNEA 5, that is scheduled to be held between the 28th of March, 28th of February and the 2nd of March, 2022 in the following year. This is going to be a historic event. It is anticipated that in this session, in this biennial session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, which is the highest forum, the highest body regarding environmental matters globally, the problem of plastic litter, of plastic pollution will be discussed comprehensively, and a protocol, a legal instrument to regulate the entire spectrum, the entire cycle, or the entire plastic cycle will be drafted. Plastic pollution is a very serious threat to our environment, our oceans, our seas, our lakes, our rivers, our water bodies, our wetlands, and the soil of planet Earth is continuously being polluted by plastic waste, which is non-degradable, and it is converting it's converting the soil, it's converting our planet Earth into one sprawling garbage dump. It is seriously polluting our aquatic environment, and it is imperative that we put in place a binding legal instrument to regulate the production and disposal of plastic, and take prompt measures to immediately ban the use of the production of single-use plastic products. We in ESTO began our journey with our effort to ban single-use plastic, and we have worked with partners both nationally and internationally to approximate our objective to create a plastic waste-free Bangladesh and a plastic waste-free world. We welcome and shall make every effort to assist our government in playing a very positive role in the drafting of a protocol, legal framework that will be binding on all countries of the world to reduce and eventually totally eradicate plastic and we in Bangladesh must participate in a global response, but we have to participate actively in a global response to reduce and eventually eradicate plastic pollution. In this webinar that we have organized, we have the privilege of having the Honorable Minister in charge of the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change, and other policymakers of Bangladesh, as well as distinguished participants, both from Bangladesh and places outside Bangladesh. We are indeed very grateful to have Ambassador Naoki with us in this webinar. I hope the deliberations of this webinar will be very active and the recommendations that I hope the deliberations in this webinar will be very fruitful, and the participants will actively make contributions to the recommendations that we hope will come out of the seminar. And these recommendations, we trust, will serve as an useful input to the government of Bangladesh and the delegation of Bangladesh that will participate in the United Nations Environment Assembly session, the 5th biennial session of the UNEA next February, March, between the end of February and the beginning of March next year. I thank all the seminar all the webinar participants who are with us here today, and all our distinguished guests. At this point, I think I shall wind up and request Ridita to begin the proceedings of the webinar. I'm afraid I shall, because of a previous appointment, be unable to be present during the course of this webinar, but I trust the webinar will be a success. I take this opportunity to wish. I take this opportunity to wish everyone present my best wishes for my Christmas greetings and my best wishes for the new year, for the year 2022. With these words, I'd like to wind up and withdraw from this webinar. Thank you for listening to my words. And once again, please accept my best wishes.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving us a good start with your wonderful words. And now the time has come to see the presentation. And for that, I would like to invite Ms. Ridita Firdaus Apu, Assistant Program Officer of ESDO.
Thank you so much, Samina Apu, for maintaining the bandwidth. I'm stopping my video, so I suppose that is okay with everyone. And is my screen visible? Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon to all our honorable guests, respected panelists, speakers, and all our distinguished participants. I'm Ridita Firdaus, Assistant Program Officer of ESDO. We have gathered here to discuss about a very vital issue, that is to moving toward a global agreement on plastic pollution. But first, I'd like you to get more familiar with ESDO. That is Environment and Social Development Organization. From the name, we can have an idea about what ESDO works for. From 1990, ESDO is tirelessly working for a sustainable and pollution-free environment. ESDO started its journey with a plastic bag ban campaign. Since then, ESDO is working for several issues that severely impact human health and environment. From the presence of mercury in dental filling to the presence of lead in our household paint, to make communities live by zero-waste lifestyle to advocating against banning single-use plastic, ESDO is working in every possible sector to make the environment toxic-free. And we are really anticipating that everyone will share the same vision and work alongside with us to make it achievable. Now, plastic. It is such a wonderful object because of its durability. And it is indeed such an awful thing because of its so durable. It came as a hero in our life, and now it is named as one of the top global crises. The global scenario of plastic pollution is well known to everyone here, and Bangladesh is not safe from the plastic pollution either. Plastic and its impact on human health is poorly understood here in Bangladesh, and the cost-effective nature is highly focused here. 14 million pieces of polythene bags are used every day in Dhaka city alone, though it is a banned object here. There had been a drastic increase in particularly single-use plastic waste during the time of COVID-19 pandemic. Also, the neighboring countries' improperly dumped waste are ending up in our seas, as we have 57 transboundary rivers in Bangladesh. Additionally, there has been a continuous rerouting of illegal waste shipments to emerging import countries, primarily located in South and Southeast Asia. So this is actually more than a global problem. Now, as plastic has been identified as one of the most problematic issues of our age, there has been a lot of solution invented to this plastic pollution crisis, to address this plastic pollution crisis. But we really see no less impact because those solutions are not really feasible. Incineration, the most common solution given by the producers, is one of the false solutions because it is not climate friendly at all, as burning 1 ton of plastic emits nearly 3 tons of carbon dioxide. This process emits toxics, including cancer-causing, endocrine and immune-disrupting dioxins and furans, heavy metals, including mercury, cadmium, and lead. Establishing incineration facilities is more expensive than landfilling, and these facilities are generally sited in low-income and marginalized communities, which creates socioeconomic and racial injustice. The plastic to fuel idea is indeed very catchy, considering the global scarcity of conventional natural energy resources. But this is also a false solution, as this process emits carbon dioxide in both production and burning of plastic-derived fuel, which is actually another fossil fuel. This process releases pollutants in gaseous emissions and byproduct in a similar way to waste incineration. Then comes chemical recycling, which is a quite unproven technology. Often the outputs are burned due to the low quality and high levels of contamination. Again, this is not an environment-friendly solution either, because processing 1 ton of plastics in pyrolysis facility emits at least 3 tons of carbon dioxide and releases toxicants in plastic into the environment and as air emission and residues. Then comes downcycling. The downcycling process, like plastic to road, plastic to brick, hazardous chemicals can leach when downcycled materials are exposed to heat, ultraviolet rays, and water. Another reason this is not a feasible solution that the resulting microplastic can attract more pollutants, and plastic-based construction materials are a significant fire hazard. Then comes biodegradable plastic. This produces more greenhouse generation emission than fossil-based plastic, and while scale of adoption of this biodegradable plastic could require 5% of all arable land, it has similar level of toxicity of conventional plastic. It also takes up to years to degrade per item unless supported by a nearby industrial composting facilities. So what are the real solution of this alarming crisis? Simple. We have to produce less plastic. We have to consume less plastic and encourage the alternative service delivery models. And of course, we need to avoid the false solutions which divert our attention, energy, and resources from the true solution that is leading up to a proper global agreement to regulate plastic, because it is beyond any the ability of any single country or region or sector to address this plastic pollution crisis alone. As no such framework currently exists to coordinate action at a global level, this is exactly why we are asking for delegates to support the Global Plastic Treaty at UNEA 5. The ultimate goal of this agreement would be to eliminate the toxic impact of plastic throughout its full life cycle: production, transport, use, and disposal. So the major goals to anchor a solid agreement with action at its core can be categorized like the 3 steps I'm showing in this slide. Minimizing virgin plastic production and consumption, facilitating safe circularity of plastics, and of course, eliminating plastic pollution from the environment. According to the United Nations, 127 countries have now regulated single-use plastic. But the thing is, we still do not see any less pollution. So it is quite clear that a single country-wise action cannot tackle this crisis. We need to act globally. Norway was the first country to propose this issue of Global Plastic Treaty, and Japan was the first country to support it. And now I suppose we are all for it. We are really hoping that all the countries from all over the world will support the requirement for a global agreement for a new legally binding treaty on plastic pollution to be established at UNEA 5.2. Thank you for hearing me for so long and your kind attention. I'm really looking forward to an enlightening discussion ahead. I'm handing over the floor back to Samina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Apu, for giving us such a nice presentation. It was very comprehensive and informative. That quite shows the scenario from global perspective. Now it is time for the panel discussion session. And for that, I would like to call our first panelist, Mr. Tim Greville, sir, attorney and environmental lawyer, Environmental Investigation Agency, EIA, United Kingdom. Mr. Tim is an experienced environmental lawyer, joined the Environmental Investigation Agency, EIA, in 2011, providing legal and policy advocacy and advice on marine plastic pollution and climate change at the European Union and international levels. He has extensive experience with governmental and non-governmental organizations on a wide range of environmental issues. Today, Sir will discuss about the Global Plastic Treaty and the recommendations on the national intervention for this agreement.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. I will show a screen with some slides, if I can figure out how to do this. I do not believe, there we go. I believe you can see the screen now. Hello, my name is Tim Grabiel. I'm with the Environmental Investigation Agency. We're an environmental nonprofit with offices in Europe, the US, but with operations all around the world. We're going to briefly be talking about our march towards a new global instrument on plastic pollution and the current state of affairs with some recommendations in the end. As we know, plastic pollution has captured the imagination of the public and policymakers around the world. We have a real issue here, as previous speakers highlighted, and it needs to be addressed. We've had various interventions at the international level to different degrees of effectiveness. The IMO, the International Maritime Organization, has an action plan in which it seeks to take out certain measures to address sea-based sources of marine plastic pollution. The Basel Convention in 2019 adopted amendments to help regulate the international trade of certain types of plastic waste, certain problematic plastic waste streams, and that has been a very welcome development. The Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations has also adopted some guidelines, most notably the voluntary guidelines on the marking of fishing gear. But taken together, these actions were largely considered inadequate. And the United Nations Environment Assembly has been taking the lead in trying to craft a global response, a new global governance framework, a convention on plastic pollution, as it were. Now, currently, we have 2 draft resolutions for consideration at UNEA 5.2 that would seek to establish an intergovernmental negotiating committee that would negotiate a new global agreement. We have the resolution that has been submitted by Rwanda and Peru and co-sponsored by over 40 countries. I include a list there for your information. And recently, I think on Monday, Japan submitted a resolution as well that would also establish an INC and circulated that for consideration as well at UNEA 5.2. Now, we have 2 resolutions that seek to do the same thing. They will need to be merged at some point and ultimately considered at UNEA and adopted for this process to start. But I want to just highlight that there are some stark differences between the 2 resolutions. The issues at stake between the 2 resolutions include whether the scope is going to cover all plastic pollution or just marine plastic pollution. The Rwanda-Peru resolution has sought to craft a global response to address plastic pollution in all environments, marine, terrestrial, and freshwater, whereas the Japanese resolution focuses on marine plastic pollution exclusively. The coverage is also different between the 2 visions in the two resolutions. In the Rwanda-Peru resolution, we have explicit reference to a full life cycle approach to addressing plastic pollution that includes consideration of how we can achieve sustainable levels of production and consumption of virgin plastics, how we can improve product design, as well as waste management. Whereas the Japan resolution appears to focus mostly on waste management as the intervention opportunity at the international level. We also have differences in how we would gauge our progress and monitor and report on the actions that we're taking. Within the Rwanda and Peru resolution, we have clear obligations, whereas within the Japan resolution, there are no obligations on monitoring and reporting. Likewise, the references in the 2 resolutions on financial aspects are different. Under the Rwanda-Peru resolution, we would have consideration to a dedicated financial mechanism, one that would assist developing countries and countries with economies in transition in meeting their commitments. It is unclear how the Japan resolution would address the financial arrangements to assist the countries most in need. Likewise, within the Rwanda-Peru resolution, we have consideration of a dedicated scientific body to help guide the governing body of this new convention that would provide science, technical assessment, to inform the decision-making of the governing body. Within the Japan resolution, it seems to be a reliance on the global partnership on marine litter to fulfill this function. Likewise, the Rwanda-Peru resolution has an open mandate, one that would allow the INC, the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, to craft a global response as they see necessary and take under consideration items that maybe were not mentioned in the resolutions themselves. Whereas in the Japan resolution, it seems to be that the INC would be limited in what it could consider. So I want to just highlight, we have two dramatically different visions for what the response should be at the international level. I believe that at stake is the very essence of what we're going to craft. One of the opportunities for Bangladesh at this early juncture is to consider co-sponsorship of one of the resolutions. I would highly encourage giving due consideration to joining the long list of countries that support the Rwanda-Peru resolution, for this is the most comprehensive approach, the most comprehensive vision for how to address plastic pollution that's currently on the table. And we look forward to future discussions going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for this splendid presentation. Now, next, I would like to call upon our second panelist, Mr. David Azzoli, sir, Geneva Managing Attorney, Director of Environmental Health Program, Center for International Environment Law, CIEL, Geneva, Switzerland. Mr. Azzoli is a French attorney who studied public international law in France and Spain before specializing in environmental law. He comes to CIEL from Friends of the Earth Europe in Brussels, where he coordinated the chemical and nanotechnologies campaign. In addition to directing CIEL's environmental health program, David Sir also co-leads plastic work, examining the environmental health aspects of it and coordinating civil society's engagement in global policies forum, such as the United Nations Environmental Assembly and the Basel Convention. He will shed light on needs and opportunities for the plastic treaty, focusing on national and international cooperation and participation.
Thank you very much to the organizer, and thank you very much to the participants and to everyone who is joining us online now from Bangladesh and all around the region and the world. I want to also thank the organizer for the opportunity to address this particularly important question at this juncture, because we're at a very strategic time in the response that the world will provide to the plastic crisis that was very expertly described so far. I will not be using slides today because I wanted this conversation to be short, and I wanted to be sure that I could adjust to what had been said before. And as the plastic crisis has been extremely well detailed and presented, and as the previous speaker also made it very clear about what are the general options and what is the context in which the engagement would take place, I want to focus particularly on what would make the most sense, or how should Bangladesh should consider its particular situation and context and specificities to identify the best ways of engagement in the ongoing process. And as was presented just before, discussions are already quite well advanced in designing different approaches to the responses to the plastic crisis that we're experiencing and going through. Some ideas have been advanced specifically to in relation to the mechanism that could be put in place through the treaty, and there are also quite a number of reflections around what are the impacts that would what are the impacts that any of these measures and proposals would have on different sectors. Bangladesh is a very large country that is embedded in the international trade of various materials, both plastic and quite a number of products, and also is facing quite particular challenges in trying to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. And so I would like to talk about two separate ways of thinking of the future global response and the future treaty. The first element, in addition to analyzing in details the two proposed resolution that are on the table. And in that respect, I want to indicate that together with EIA, the Environmental Investigating Agency, from which the previous speaker was speaking, we have developed a table comparing line by line, word by word, the two different resolutions that would allow countries like Bangladesh and all other stakeholders to really get an idea and understand what are the differences of approaches in quite a bit of detail. As was presented just earlier, the future treaty to be negotiated has the opportunity to be quite wide and to going into quite some details about the responses that could be adopted. In that respect, there are many different elements of the treaty that I believe would make a lot of sense for Bangladesh to look into, to focus in on, particularly in order to prepare its position and its participating in the negotiation and the next United Nations Environment Assembly. Some of those issues were mentioned also as differences between the two resolutions. The question of financial mechanism is a very important one. We know that there are currently a large number of multilateral environmental agreements that are adopted, bearing quite a lot of obligation on a number of countries. These obligations can be challenging without adequate financial support for the countries to implement and to enforce and implement in their national legislation and in their national situation. So identifying the question of financial support could be one particular element where Bangladesh could bring some of its own experience and expertise into the negotiations. Other elements that are quite important to figure out is the nature of the various obligations that will be adopted, the role that national action plans and national country and national initiatives will be taking. As was described before, the issue is a global crisis that no country can address alone. However, there is a major role for countries to develop initiatives and responses that are tailored to the particular situation. Now, will those individual national measures and initiatives be coordinated, be following a common plan, or will each country be left on its own to design what are the appropriate responses that should be brought? We believe that there is a need for a large level of coordination and some support to the countries in developing this in terms of guidance, in terms of common objectives and common approaches to be adopted together. Different approaches are currently put on the table, and we believe that it would make a lot of sense for Bangladesh to also identify what are the country's preferred approach and most necessary elements to be found in the treaty. Other elements that will be part of the discussion that would be quite important for countries like Bangladesh to weigh in are issues about access to data, reporting and monitoring both of the various obligations and the evolution of the situation to assess the efficacy of the measures that are being adopted. There are questions around plastic production. And finally, in relation to some of the other issues that were mentioned before, elements of different policy options and tools that could be put in place or supported via the treaty, such as extended producer responsibility, for example, that provides legal and institutional tools to ensure the implementation and enforcement of such important general international principle, such as the polluter pays principles and others. In addition to looking at the different building blocks of our global response to the plastic, we believe that it is also important for countries and in particular for countries like Bangladesh to look at what are the most relevant sectors that could be or would be impacted by the measures that would be designed and adopted in the context of UNEA. I thought of two economic sectors that I believe are key for the economy and well-being of the people of Bangladesh, and that will indeed are likely to be impacted by the measure put in place. One element is fishing gear. We know that Bangladesh has a large coast and relies also quite heavily on access to the sea and on fishing grounds. And we know that the impact of both plastic on the fish resources and the impact that fishermen or the way fishermen can contribute to this impact is intrinsically linked. There are, as was mentioned by the previous speakers, guiding frameworks or guiding documents that have been adopted or discussed in the context of the IMO or in the context of FAO, for example, but this is probably something where Bangladesh has an experience to share with the rest of the world and to help guiding some of the future discussion. The other sector that I believe is extremely critical for Bangladesh to look in particular, as it provides a great opportunity to share Bangladesh's experience as well as have a large impact on the population of citizens and workers in Bangladesh, is the sector of textile. We know that textile is a very important sector in the Bangladeshi economy, and we also know that the textile sector is highly dependent on the use of cheap plastic and is at the convergence of how plastic is a symptom of the troubles that we're facing, both in terms of the impact it has at the production and exchange, the impact it can have on the health of various workers along the supply chain, and then a lot of questions that are being asked about our production development models that lead to a very large quantities of waste textiles being produced. And so the reason I wanted to highlight this issue was to support the government and stakeholder of Bangladesh in identifying areas that are most relevant to them and in which they would have the most to bring in the context of the upcoming negotiations at the UNEA 5.2 coming in a few months, in order to support the shaping of a global response that will not only be the best tailored response to address the tree crisis that we're planetary crisis that we're currently facing, but also ensure that this global response is designed in a way that benefits from both the experience of Bangladesh and also in the way that could benefit the country and the people of Bangladesh the most. So thank you very much for your time, and I very much look forward to the future discussion with the rest of the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your excellent presentation. Now we're moving to our guest speakers, Professor Steve Fletcher, Professor of Ocean Policy and Economy, Sustainability and the Environment Research Team, Director of Revolution Plastics, University of Portsmouth, United Kingdom. Professor Steve Fletcher, sir, is a member of the UN International Research Panel, Paris, and a fellow of the UN Environment World Conservation Monitoring Center, Cambridge. He has worked extensively with the UN family of ocean and biodiversity conventions, governments, agencies, businesses, universities, and a wider network of international conservation organizations. His research interests include sustainability transitions, marine conservation, and confronting the challenges of plastic pollution. Professor Steve Fletcher, sir, to kindly share insights on impact of plastic on climate change and how a global treaty may address the current climate crisis.
Hello, thank you very much for that introduction. And thank you also for the opportunity to contribute to this esteemed high-level dialogue on the Global Plastics Treaty. I would also like to acknowledge the world-leading work being done by ESDO to highlight and tackle plastic pollution in Bangladesh and beyond. I I am the director of Revolution Plastics at the University of Portsmouth, which is a big university-wide research initiative to tackle the negative effects of plastics at the global scale. But today I'm really representing our Global Plastics Policy Centre, which undertakes independent policy analysis to support better plastics-focused policy making in the public and private sectors. And of course, we're heavily focused on supporting the journey to a global plastics treaty. I don't have any slides either, so I'm just going to talk for the next 3 or 4 minutes or so. As the introduction suggested, I'm just going to make some initial comments on the connection between plastics and climate change, and then share some ideas about the implications of that connection for the Global Treaty on Plastics. The first and fundamental point to make is that action on plastics is also climate action. Plastics contribute to climate change in 3 principal ways. First, the production of plastics itself releases carbon. It is thought that under a business as usual scenario, by 2040, plastics will account for 19% of the total carbon budget if we intend to keep the temperature rise globally below 1.5 degrees. Much of the plastic produced, of course, is single use, which is used for a matter of moments before it's discarded. Less than 5% globally is recycled, and the rest is burned, put into waste dumps, or ends up as pollution. From a climate perspective, this is not an efficient use of our carbon budget. Secondly, plastic pollution in nature limits the ability of natural systems to cope with climate change. Therefore, the presence of plastic pollution can exacerbate the impacts of climate change for the environment, but also the people who depend upon it. So it's a human problem as much as a natural problem. For example, it's been widely proved that marine ecosystems face multiple threats, including habitat destruction, overfishing potentially, nutrient pollution, warming, acidification. And when plastic pollution is added to the mix, it further reduces the ability of those ecosystems to cope with climate change. It's been shown also that at high level of concentration, plastic in the ocean can accelerate warming, is toxic to most species, and can affect food chains and reduce biodiversity. We know that over 800 species are already known to be affected by plastic pollution through ingestion and entanglement and other toxic effects. And thirdly, and less directly, plastic is an enabler of carbon emissions because it supports activities and actions that that directly generate carbon emissions. So for example, plastics are used in a lot of transportation purposes. They lightweight cars and aeroplanes, and of course they generate huge amounts of carbon emissions. So plastic in a way is both a direct contributor to climate change, but also very indirectly as well through enabling other forms of emissions. So in other words, there's a very, very strong link between our attitude and use of attitude to and use of plastics and the global climate crisis. So what can we do about that with respect to the UNEA 5.2 negotiations, and what might be useful for the government of Bangladesh to consider in that context? Well, I think some of my comments will be aligned with the previous 2 speakers, particularly David. I think the evidence from the research work that we've undertaken in the Global Plastics Policy Centre is that isolated policies, such as bans on specific items or isolated recycling schemes, which are extremely useful at tackling specific problems and signalling intent, they simply do not generate the necessary system shifts to permanently tackle the climate or the plastics crisis. So rather than focus on those individual interventions that might work for an individual country or for an individual specific topic, my comments would just address some suggestions around perhaps what Bangladesh could do to focus on the substantive content of the treaty. And in that spirit, I would just suggest 2 approaches, really. The first is to encourage consideration of the plastics system in its entirety, including the production, the use and disposal of plastics and not separate those out. Measures we put in place to tackle the production of plastic or to change the production of plastic need to flow through how people and businesses use plastic, and then to make sure that the measures are there to capture that plastic as waste later on in the system. So this idea of of production, use and disposal is somehow different and disconnected is just wrong. We really need to think of plastic as a single entire system. Under the terms of the treaty, and this has been alluded to by other speakers, we can begin to identify where the leakage points are from plastic into nature and develop a suite of joined up policy interventions that systematically tackle those leakage points in a coordinated and joined up way. And that, of course, is important internationally, but it's also important within countries as well. And the national action plans have to, or in my view, have to tackle have to adopt that strategy too, that integrated national level approach. The evidence that certainly we've been working on is that in terms of plastics policy effectiveness, so not just what the policy is, but how effective that policy can be delivered, then it's that systemic and systematic approach that really generates most benefits at the national, region and global levels. The second comment to focus on is that whilst looking at the plastic system as a system, it's also really important to place particular emphasis on upstream interventions. So these are interventions that avoid plastics entering nature at all. These are interventions that take place at source before consumers or other businesses are even involved in the system. And there are well-recognized policies that can be put in place and can be included in the global treaty that can deliver this. So, for example, we could reduce the production of avoidable plastics. As the very first speaker commented, a lot of plastic is really important and really necessary, particularly for medical purposes. So we can't just simplify that into we can't use single-use plastics. We have to focus on plastics that don't need to be plastic, or products that don't need to be plastic. So how do we reduce our reliability, how do we reduce our focus on those products? So this might be, this also has the benefit of shifting the burden of responsibility from consumers, who right now are expected to do the right thing by making better choices, but often they don't have the choice. And so reducing the production of avoidable plastics shifts the burden of responsibility from consumers to plastics manufacturers and product producers. That's really important. The next one, make sure that the products themselves, if they contain plastic, are designed for circularity. Product design is critically important and is often something that is left out of these discussions. Product design must think about end-of-life solutions. And the key issue here is reducing the diversity of plastics that are used in products. Make sure the plastic that the products are built from are the same plastics that can be recycled or that have reliable waste streams. We start to make more and more products out of plastics that can't be recycled or that don't fit in with the existing waste streams. It's hardly surprising we end up with much more solutions. So that's a product design for circularity is very much an upstream solution. And finally, we can also, of course, substitute plastics for more environmentally friendly materials. So taking plastics out of products entirely. You often hear, particularly from the plastics industry, that can be problematic because the products or materials that are substituted in can be more environmentally harmful. The simple solution to that is simply do life cycle analysis on the products, on the materials coming into the products. We have the science that can solve that problem and bring that into just a factual discussion. And, sorry, my son has just arrived. All of these interventions, particularly upstream ones, reduce climate impact substantially. I'll leave my comments there, other than to say that myself and the Global Plastics Policy Centre at the University of Portsmouth would be honoured to contribute to further discussions to support the People's Republic of Bangladesh's journey towards a global plastics treaty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was so great and a very comprehensive insights. Thank you very much. Moving on to our next guest speaker, Vito A. Busante, sir, Policy of Technical Advisor, International Pollutants Elimination Network, IPEN, USA. Mr. Vito A. Busante is an environmental health lawyer with over 15 years of international experience in drafting, analyzing, and implementing environmental legislation. He has a strong knowledge on chemicals, nanomaterials, and pesticides legislation with extensive experience in strategic litigation and designing advocacy campaigns. He has experiences in working with people over 50 countries. Unfortunately, sir couldn't be with us virtually for the time difference, but he has sent a video presentation that will show how plastics treaty for the prevention of the toxic impact is imposing throughout its whole life cycle. And for that, I would like to request Ridita Perdos Apu for playing the video presentation.
Dear everybody, greetings from Canada. It's a great honor for me to be speaking on behalf of IPEN about the upcoming hopeful treaty on plastic pollution. In particular, I want to thank ESDO for inviting me. ESDO is one of the IPEN's prominent members that has shown leadership on plastic pollution and on chemical pollution throughout the year by also promoting the ban on plastic bags back in 2002 and also the ban on single-use plastics in in coastal regions of Bangladesh. And so Bangladesh is an important country, is a country that has shown leadership, has shown the way of how it is possible to tackle plastic pollution effectively. Obviously, there's a long way to go, and that's why this treaty is an important opportunity to take an international approach to control the toxic harms of plastics throughout its life cycle. And why do I talk about toxic plastic? Well, obviously, IPEN's commitment is to have a toxic-free future and to eliminate the toxic impacts of toxic chemicals. And if we look at the increase in plastic production in the next decades, we'll see that at the same time, the prediction is also that the chemical industry is going to increase at the same pace. And why is that? Well, it's the similar feedstock, it's the same industry, it's the petrochemical industry, but also plastics hardly function without chemicals. And many of these chemicals are toxic chemicals. We're particularly concerned by chemicals that are endocrine disrupting, chemicals such as phthalates, brominated flame retardants, bisphenols, all chemicals that have shown to have harmful human health impacts and that are found in plastics. Like a recent study showed that there's around 10,000 types of chemical substances that are used in plastics, and many of them are toxic. And so we're looking to control the toxic impact of these chemicals that are used in plastics. And this is important when we think about the circular economy. Do we want a circular economy to circulate toxic chemicals within the plastic over and over in the products that are made from the plastics that get into the circular loop? Well, no, we want this circular economy to be a clean one, not to be a toxic one. And also we need to look at the end of life. The end of life of plastics, which harms more than disproportionately countries in low and middle income areas because of the leaching of the chemicals in the soil, because of the open burning of plastics, but also the incineration and the toxic impacts of incineration and of the dioxin that it creates, all fairly well documented. And so we need to look at how to clean up the plastic economy, let's say. what is important from our point of view is not only to look at the physical impact of plastics. Surely is important. We don't want wildlife to be impacted negatively by entanglement and entrapment and ingestion of plastic that causes so many deaths of whales, turtle, and other marine fauna. But we need to also look at the more invisible part of the equation of what plastics brings, like the biological impacts of nano and microplastics and the toxic impact of the chemical additives. And therefore, IPEN's views, and IPEN is a network of over 500 organizations in 128 countries that came together to have a common view on the plastics treaty, is to eliminate the toxic impact of plastics throughout its life cycle, production, use, and disposal. Use. Obviously, chemicals will be used still for some time, and change doesn't happen immediately, but we need to be able, through transparency mechanism, to track all the chemicals that are used in plastics so that we can protect human health and local community. On the end of life, we need to make sure that only plastics that don't contain hazardous chemicals are recycled, and so eliminate those are hazardous chemicals from design, and all the others, they need to be all the current stockpiles of contaminated plastics need to be managed in such a way that they don't release toxic chemicals and don't have harmful impact. Final words just on the financing. I think it's important that we remember that implementing a convention is costly in many countries, and it shouldn't be the cost of it shouldn't be borne by taxpayers. So we need to find mechanisms that generate considerable financing, and that financing is the responsibility of the polluters. So what is my call? What is IPEN's call for the government of Bangladesh? Is to support the resolution that was presented by Rwanda and Peru and will be discussed at UNEA 5.2 in February 2022, and particularly have special attention on this provision. Paragraph 2, letter C of the resolution particularly calls for addressing the product design and the use, including compounds, additives, and harmful substances, as well as intentionally added microplastics. And this is very important because it is one of those provisions that could be a game changer. It can force industry to rethink the way they produce plastics and they place plastics on the market, that they look at the entire life cycle and they don't include toxic chemicals in them. Those toxic chemicals make also those same plastics difficult to recycle and increase their the negative impact that it has on human health. So hopefully also Bangladesh will be supporting this approach to the plastic treaty, and particularly aiming at the redesign of how plastics are made right now, and that they are not toxic, but they are clean, and so that the legacy of these toxic legacies is eliminated as soon as possible. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for listening. Have a nice day.
Though sir is not here with us at the moment, but we still would like to thank sir for this wonderful presentation. Now, last but not definitely not the least, I would like to request Mohammad Ziaul Haq sir, Director, Dhaka Region, Department of Environment. Mr. Ziaul Haq sir is a dedicated official at Department of Environment, and he has been working on plastic issue for a very long time and has always showed his constant support to ESDO. Today, Sir will provide feedback on Global Plastic Treaty. Sir, am I being heard?
Yes. Thank you. Good afternoon, honorable minister, chief guest, honorable guest of honor, honorable special guest, and highly respected panelists, resource person, and distinguished participants. In fact, at the outset, let me congratulate and appreciate ESDO for organizing this very important discussion dialogue on a global agreement on marine litter and plastic pollution. And in fact, this discussion has been going on for some time. And the last part of the discussion will take place in the second part of 5th session of the UN Environment Assembly. So looking at the upcoming UN Assembly, this dialogue would be very important. And I feel that through our dialogue, the government of Bangladesh will have the better understanding on what would be the role that the Bangladesh can play in these particular negotiations to actually craft the global treaty on plastic pollution. In fact, I have been hearing the resource person's points, and I have written down some of the points very carefully. And I also feel that Bangladesh obviously appreciate the global initiatives spearheaded by a number of countries, particularly the 2 resolutions that has been put forward by Rwanda, Peru, and Japan. And in fact, these 2 resolutions will be widely discussed in the UN Environment Assembly in February, next February. So my point is that whatever we will agree on collectively by all countries together at global scale, we have to consider many things. And in that case, Bangladesh feels that the common goal of this global treaty should be to strengthen the global response to effectively address the negative environmental consequence arising from the plastic pollution and marine litter. And we have to be aware of the fact that whatever we'll discuss and we'll agree on eventually at the end of the day, it should be in line with in the different national circumstances, and very much in the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication. So in that case, any treaty should be considered in that line. And I feel that obviously the plastic pollution is a global problem, and we have to resort to global solution. And we also acknowledge the fact that we need to address this in an urgent basis. So a global agreement or global treaty obviously will address those global nature of plastic pollution and related issues. And at the same time, we also consider that it has become a common global concern, common concern of humankind, and it requires a global appropriate response. But the point is, I would like to mention here that Bangladesh will obviously participate in the negotiations, and Bangladesh has been participating in the negotiations over the last few months, even in 2020. So the point is that with regard to the contents of the global treaty, I feel that the previous speakers have already said and rightfully pointed out some of the very important issues in terms of scope, coverage, and monitoring and reporting, financial aspects. What would be the support provisions to be put in place in the treaty, the scientific body, the governance issue and mandate. And at the same time, I also feel that the resolution of Japan, we have to carefully look at the resolution of Japan, since this issue should be discussed and should be considered in a holistic manner, taking into consideration the national context, the different national circumstances. And at this point in time, I would say that Bangladesh has been putting a great effort towards developing some national action plan on plastic pollution. Very recently, Bangladesh adopted solid waste management rules through which all issues relating to sustainable waste management, including plastic waste management, has been reflected, duly reflected. And at the same time, Bangladesh also finalized the roadmap and also gazetted the roadmap on reducing, phasing out the single-use plastics. And in that case, obviously, Bangladesh has made some specific targets in terms of a certain percentage of plastic waste to be recycled, phasing out of single-use plastic in a specific time frame, addressing a reduction in use and manufacture of virgin material of plastics, and so on and so forth. But the point is, what the team and David and Professor has already mentioned, Professor Steve already mentioned that we need to consider the issues in terms of legally binding or voluntary nature. And if we pursue for having a legally binding global agreement, then some of the very specific activities that has been taken forward by the national government will be jeopardized, will be at stake. And at the same time, we understand that many countries are in a good shape of exporting the plastic materials, plastic goods to the foreign countries, and they have been earning a lot of foreign currency, export currency through these plastic good exports. So we need to consider this in a holistic manner. And obviously, I feel that in terms of comparing with the Paris Agreement, frankly speaking, Paris Agreement, though we are actually considering the Paris Agreement is a legally binding agreement, but if you look at the compliance regime of the Paris Agreement, it is very much facilitative, non-punitive, non-adversarial. And in fact, I happen to be the member of the Paris Agreement Compliance Committee for some time, and it is absolutely facilitative, non-adversarial, non-punitive. So that's why Paris Agreement is considered universal agreement. But the point is well taken in terms of reporting and monitoring. But the point is, again, the point is that we have to have the capacity to actually collect, compile, and regularly update our national data on the plastic waste and other related information. At the same time, we have to provide the regular reports to the global community. So in that case, as said by Steve, and said by David, that we have to consider that if we want to implement our national action plan or anything around national action plan, we require some international support to be provided to Bangladesh and other countries who are needing this, and in that case, we have to consider the support, financial support, technological support, and capacity building support. And in that case, the treaty should carefully and should adequately address the issues of support to be provided in terms of finance, technology, and capacity building. So my point is, again, that we have to be very careful of the fact that if we want to see a global treaty, it is not easy. So whether we can consider a treaty that will be implemented in phases. For instance, the treaty or any international instrument that can address initially the single-use plastic, reduction and gradually phasing out the single-use plastics. Then later, the treaty will actually capture the other plastics, the other use and consumption of plastics, production and import of plastics. So Bangladesh can consider this to implement this treaty in phases, and also can consider some of the plastic material can be included in a list, and then the annexure of the treaty can be implemented in a definitive time period. Then after that, there will be a new list of plastic materials to be included in the list, and eventually they will be implemented at later phases or later stage. So this is my opinion at this point in time. And obviously, our Additional Secretary, our Honorable Minister will touch upon some of the issues relating to the Global Treaty on Plastic Pollution. And Bangladesh will obviously effectively participate in the negotiations. But we feel that the combination of both resolutions, the Rwanda-Peru resolutions and Japan resolutions, will be the best way forward towards reaching a consensus among all countries together. Thank you very much. And again, I would like to congratulate ESDO for their brilliant organizing efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your beautiful insights. Now, with this session, our panel discussion session has come to an end. It is time for the open discussion. We encourage you all to speak up and share your thoughts, which is very important. While doing so, please raise your hand if you wish to speak. You will be given floor, or you can also write your comments in chat box and your comments will be attended. Also, as we are live on our Facebook, so this is for our viewers. If you are viewing, please, and if you have any queries or comments, please comment on the comment section. Now, to moderate the open discussion session, I would like to call Dr. Shahriar Hussain, sir, Secretary General of ESDO.
Thank you, Samina. Honorable Chief Guest, Honorable Minister, Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of Bangladesh, Honorable Special Guest, Guest of Honor, panelist speaker, participants. So this is to be inform you that because of the time limit, we have to be cautious, and floor is open for your comments, question, and suggestion. Just 1 minute for each. Yes, Professor Shamim, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, ESDO, for organizing such a nice seminar to learn the ideas of the different people who are working in this sector. And my concern about the plastic is that I was also present in previous seminar organized by ESDO, and we know that it is a very good idea to ban the use of plastics to save our environment. There's no doubt, and nobody will argue about that. The trouble is that actually, is it really possible to completely stop the use of plastics? Probably the answer is no. Yeah, many developed countries still they are using the plastics. Even the use of plastics are there. I think the uses are more in some places. So it is a very good idea to sign a treaty where countries who are exporting the plastic materials to the other countries so that they pay the countries who are importing the plastic materials so that they can manage them. At the same time, my concern is, as I conduct some research works with the plastics, those are actually, we know that one-time use plastics are used in our country, and they are floating everywhere by the roads and the aquatic bodies everywhere. So what we are trying is that we are trying to actually manage these plastics that has been by this time used by the people, and they are spreading here and there. So the concern is that they have some toxic materials. It is true. They have some heavy metals. They might have some heavy metals. Two things should be kept in mind. One is to reduce the use of plastics. It has to be done through some regulations. And at the same time, we should also keep in mind that the plastics, those has been used by this time, and they are now in our different aquatic bodies in the different low-lying areas by the roads. In Bangladesh, we see it very often. So we need to also
Professor Shamim,
yes,
Professor Shamim, if your suggestion will taken, and if you have any further suggestion, please use the chat box. And I'm sorry, because of the time limit,
all right,
I cannot go beyond.
These are two things that we should sign the regulation. At the same time, we should also think about the plastics, those are still in the environment, to manage them. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shamim. Now I give the floor to Professor Rabiul Islam.
Thank you for the nice discussion and inviting me to the event. This Professor Rabiul Islam from Shahjalan University of Science and Technology, Ceylon. Actually, I want to share one of my research that the microplastic, the plastic, most of the cases go to the river and the ponds, especially the sea. And from the sea, we access sea foods, especially the sea fish, as well as the salt. And one of my research experiment, I found that the microplastic level in the salt is high. And the microplastic is also genotoxic. So what is the happening in our food system? It is a time to thinking. Another thinking is that Professor last speaker said that it is not easy to manage the plastics. But what is the major problem? We are thinking, what is the major problem? From my point of view, the major problem that we cannot able to separate the our wastage from the domestic wastage in collective or separately. If you see in Japan's example, I think here this is the Japanese ambassador Ayatio Nakio. He can also give his experience from his country. From the domestic sides or from the kitchen sides, they are separating their wastage, the paper, the plastics, the glass, and so on, especially the 3 or 4 things they separate separately, and then it is go to the recycle, and the recycling material is separately. But what happened in our country? We garbage all the things together within the one garbage, and all the things go to the river and summers, and all the things make a complex things. So I think it is the time of just a single policy, if you can implement to monitor and to separate the wastes from the kitchen or from the industry, it is easy to manage. Just a single policy taken by the government, by the industrial police force, it can easily be possible. Not so much investment is also required from my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rabiul. I don't see any hand. If none, and it's still opportunity for you to give your comments and suggestion to the chat box. I see here. Please recognize yourself, and floor is open for you. Jack, yes. Jailin, Miss Jainil. Floor is open. Can you hear me? I see the screen name here. I think she has a problem for connection. Okay, I see the hand. Muhammad Inayat Hussain, please proceed.
Hello.
Yes,
this
proceed,
is
please.
this is Dr. Inayat. I am working as an assistant professor in the Department of Soil, Water, and Environment at the University of Dhaka. So I have a suggestion. So recently, so what is happening in our country? Plastic materials, are being given to customers free of cost, along with different goods such as noodles, powdered milk. So I think the government should look into that matter, because this is, worsening the plastic problem in our country, because in our in our home we don't need like these plastics, this plastic stuff this much. So people are being lured, so I think the government should look into that aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to close this session because of the time limit, and our chief guest or special guest, honorable guest, are waiting here. So I back to Samina. Samina, please.
Thank you so much, sir. Now the time has come to get remarks from our distinguished guests. For that, I would like to request the special guest of our event, His Excellency, Mr. Ito Naoki, sir, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, Embassy of Japan in Bangladesh, to kindly provide sir's remarks.
Thank you very much, Samina. Honorable Minister, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Mr. Muhammad Shahab Uddin, MP, distinguished panelists, participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good evening. So I'm so pleased to have this opportunity to be invited to speak briefly about this very important issue of common interest and concern. So without question, this issue of marine plastic pollution has been high on the agenda in international community. So back in 2019, when Japan hosted the G20 Osaka summit, Japan advocated Osaka Blue Ocean Vision, which was included in the leaders' declaration in the conference. I think the gist of this Osaka Blue Ocean Vision is to have an aim to reduce additional pollution by marine plastic litter to zero by 2050 through a comprehensive life cycle approach, including reducing the discharge of mismanaged plastic litter by improved waste management and innovative solutions. So since then, Japan has been working in the international community to promote this agenda. When there was a COP26 meeting in Glasgow in November, our Prime Minister, Kishida Fumio, sent a message to the high-level panel for Ocean Vision, and also talking about a growing momentum to set out new international rules in this field. Then he said, Japan will play a leading role and support this ongoing initiative so that negotiations toward a new international legal instrument will be launched at the United Nations Environmental Assembly next February, with the widest possible participation, including major emitters and consuming countries of plastics. During the COP26, Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina exhibited wonderful leadership as the President Chair of Climate Vulnerable Forum and asked for cooperation from international community on climate change. And Bangladesh, for its part, came up with a very, very ambitious nationally determined commitment. As one of the most vulnerable countries for climate change, Bangladesh has been showing very, very proactive stance for environmental issue, which we deem very, very commendable. So we are really hoping that Japan and Bangladesh can continue to cooperate on very, very important issue of climate change and environment related issues. Here in Bangladesh, for the sustainable growth of the economy, development of blue economy is very, very important. So in this conjunction, this growing emission of plastic litter to Bay of Bengal should be a cause of high concern. So there is a good reason for Bangladesh to be even more forthcoming in dealing with this issue of marine plastic pollution. So I want to stress here is that it's very important for countries like Bangladesh will participate in the international forum, realizing the importance of setting up intergovernmental negotiating committee with the aim of coming up with international legal instrument. This is the point I really want to stress here. But previous speakers already talked about some contents of resolutions, which Japan also tabled on top of Peru and Rwanda. So if I may, I want to go into a bit of details of the resolution Japan tabled for the sake of Bangladesh friends to look into and compare those two resolutions. Japan came up with some of the elements of international agreement, including the common objective and common aim of reducing marine plastic litter, and also mentioned the setting up framework of national action plan. The resolution also talks about the importance of advancing scientific knowledge in this related field. And also, this resolution talks about the elements of capacity building, technical cooperation, as well as financial cooperation to those countries in need. So, but I think Japanese resolution identifies items to be included as provisions in the global instrument, but our draft resolution didn't really go into details of the direction of each element, so that there'll be not sort of overly prejudiced items or elements on substantial outcomes of the upcoming negotiation at Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, knowing that the widest possible participation of the countries at the negotiating table for the effective implementation of the matter is utmost importance. This resolution also talks about the timeline of negotiations. So we think it's important to start negotiations in 2022 and aims to finish negotiations by the next round of UNEA, so UNEA 6, which is envisaged to take place around springtime in 2024. And our draft resolution also talks about the importance of the whole life cycle approach, whereby all actions ranging from upstream to downstream would be encouraged in a balanced manner. So it embodies the idea that each country, based on their respective circumstances, would choose the most effective stage of the life cycle of plastics to reduce marine plastic pollution. This approach, we believe, should ultimately lead to the most efficient, effective reductions globally. On our resolution, Japan has exchanged views with many countries and has been receiving many positive reactions about the idea of draft resolution, as well as the benefits of having multiple draft resolutions on plastic pollution for countries to consider in the upcoming UN meeting. So I do hope that as countries look into and stakeholders look into those resolutions, there will be a higher degree of understanding on the merit of the resolution, draft resolution Japan tabled. But important thing is, as I said earlier, the government of Bangladesh will realize the importance of international treaty on this very important issue and agree on the start of intergovernmental negotiating committee in February next year. Japan and Bangladesh has been time-tested friends, and we are going to celebrate 50 years of diplomatic relations next year in February, actually. And we have been cooperating with each other in a related field like waste management and climate change and some other environmental issues. We have been providing technical support, capacity building, and financial support to those areas. But through this new agreement, treaty, we envisage Japan will continue to provide technical assistance, financial support, as well as capacity building to Bangladesh and other countries which are in need of such cooperation. I do hope that marking the milestone year next year, Japan and Bangladesh can develop cooperation in the area of marine plastic litter and pollution, which is relatively new field, but very, very important field. So I hope that Bangladesh government will see and understand the merit of Japan resolution. We are looking forward to cooperating and working together. Thank you very much for having me. Showaike Onek Donabad.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. It was truly beautiful. And now let us move on to the next. Now I would like to request our guest of honor, Mohammad Munirujjaman, sir, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, to kindly provide his remarks on discussed issue.
Our honorable chief guest, Mr. Shahabuddin MP, our Honorable Minister for Environment, Forest and Climate Change of Bangladesh government, and the special guest, the Ambassador, His Excellency Ambassador of Japan, Mr. Nyako, and other distinguished guest participants, and good evening to all. At the outset, I would like to convey my thanks and gratitude to SDU for organizing this very important webinar. And they have put many people, many scientists, researchers, academicians, and there are environmental activists on board of today's seminar. And it will help our ministry to set our position in the upcoming UN Environment Assembly, 50th Biennial Assembly. And over more than 1.5 hour of this webinar, our Honorable Chief Guest Minister, he has listened everything, and we, along with our officials of DOE, has been connected, and we have taken notes of your remarks and thoughts, and this will help us in preparing our position paper. And I would like to request SDU to kindly put forward the recorded notes of today's webinar to our ministry as well as DOE. And it is no doubt that the plastic, it has make our life easy for today, but it is a curse for our future. And all we believe that it is a global problem and we need global solution. That is, the whole of the globe approach is essential, as well as global governance is also very important, because only the voluntary actions will not make any good results. And we have known all this from our past experiences of different UN bodies and UN conventions. And I would like to put importance the integration of climate change, biodiversity, and waste management. That is the three organizations of UN, that is UNFCCC and UNEA, and as well as the Convention of Biodiversity. And Bangladesh, under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, we have rightly presented our position in COP26, and we are also actively involved in Convention on Biodiversity, that is COP15, and the post 2020 biodiversity global framework on biodiversity, and as well as other international scientific evidences and thoughts and protocols on waste management. And like our, and we will obviously put our appropriate position in the upcoming UNEA 5th session on global plastic treaty. And before that, we'll consider our local needs, local situation, environmental activists and all other stakeholders. And we will hear from our chief guest, our Honorable Minister, to some extent in details, the basic guidance of our positioning, but we will prepare our position paper and we will put our intervention by consulting all the stakeholders. And I would like to again give my thanks and gratitude to SDU for giving me the opportunity to join this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind remarks. Now, before we move on to our honorable chief guest remark, I would like to ask if our panelists and guest speakers, Team Sir, David Sir, and Steve Sir, has any quick comments. I guess Sir do not have any comments, but thank you so much. Tim, Sir, would you like to talk? I mean, if you have any quick comments.
Some just real quick comments. I want to thank everybody for the contributions to this conversation. It helps to fill out the framework with which the conversations are going to take place going forward. I want to particularly thank the ambassador from Japan for his views. We certainly look forward to a very active engagement at UNEA 5.2 to find a good pathway forward that builds on both the resolutions, but is commensurate to the problem. So I just wanted to sort of highlight that desire to really start to work together collaboratively in an open spirit so that we can have a response that is something to be proud of and that will be effective.
Thank you so much, sir. Professor Steve Fletcher, so if you have any quick comments.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just very quickly, I'd also just like to acknowledge the work that has been undertaken by Japan under the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision. And I should have said that in my comments earlier, the policy interventions that I was suggesting were based on a report about how to successfully implement the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision. So I think there is a lot of useful advice and support that has been developed through the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision process that could very usefully be transferred into the global treaty discussions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And now I would like to request everyone, if everyone could turn on their camera so we can capture this beautiful moment. I mean, the personnels that here with us could just turn on the cameras. It will be a very beautiful moment that you can capture. Thank you so much, everyone. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for our honorable chief guest remarks. And for that, I would like to warmly, respectfully request our chief guest, Mohammad Shahabuddin, MP, sir, Honorable Minister, sir, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, to kindly share sir's thoughts on discussed issue.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Respected session chair of this program, distinguished participants, special guest, Ambassador of Japan, Mr. Moniruzzaman, Additional Secretary of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good evening. I express my thanks to Environment and Social Development Organization, SDO, for organizing this program at this outset. I remember the architect of the independence of Bangladesh, father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, with earnest respect and gratitude. The rapid pace of urbanization and development of Bangladesh has increased the consumption of the plastic products and the amount of waste generated, especially because of plastics conventions, lightweight and durability. COVID-19 has increased the use of single-use plastic by increasing reliance on the single-use plastic, personal protective equipment, and by the significant effective lifestyle resulting in consumption changes that have generated even more plastic waste. The Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change banned the use of plastic shopping bags in 2002. But this had limited result. In 2010, Jute Packaging Act was enacted to combat the use of the plastic. The 8th five-year plan 2020-2025 acknowledged that the dumping of household waste into water bodies and labor is a major source of air and water pollution. Proposed solid waste management rules 2021 has drawn up under the Environmental Conservation Act 1995 will be the overarching regulatory framework for plastic waste management in the country. Recently, this ministry is going to implement an action plan for sustainable plastic management in passes such as short from 2022 to 2023, medium term 2024-2026, and long term 2027-2030. Implementation of the action plan identified policy and regulatory reforms and economic instruments, technology, and infrastructure and capacity building to design sustainable products, promote circular economy process, encourage sustainable consumption, and thus ensuring the waste management. The action plan is aligned to the 8th five-year plan, Sustainable Development Goal, SDGs, and other policies. Moreover, our ministry has endorsed a roadmap through Gazette notification to phase out single-use plastic in coastal areas. In order to implement the initiative, raising stakeholders' awareness is important, and behavioral changes will be critical. So sustainable communication with all key stakeholders and use of economic instruments are necessary. In the ministerial conference on marine litter plastic pollution under the UN Environment Assembly, Bangladesh emphasized that global solidarity and the involvement of all stakeholders must be guiding principles. Bangladesh also highlights the necessity for a global agreement aligned with the 2030 agenda to achieve the elimination of minimization of all the negative impacts of plastic throughout its life cycle, including the significant reduction and progressive elements of direct and indirect discharges of plastic into the environment, sustainable alternatives, and the reduction of virgin plastic production. I hope that with the combined effort of all of us, we will be able to create a plastic pollution-free world. In concluding, I would like to wholeheartedly thank and as well as invite you all to our 15th Victory Day celebration on 16 December 2021. Thank you all. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind remarks. You've been sitting with us from the beginning, and we cannot thank you enough. Thank you again. Every good things comes to an end. So did our event. The time has come for our closing remarks session. It was an amazing session. As suggestions and recommendations from you have showed how much we care and how much concerned we are about our world. We know it is almost the end of the year and everyone was busy with their respective works, but still our distinguished guests, panelists, and participants joined us and supported us. Thank you so much for that. For that, ESDO is truly grateful. This is your host, Samina Khandekar. Again, thank you all for giving us time from your busy schedule and join us to make our event more fruitful. It was an honor, an absolute honor to be your host. Now, for the closing remarks, I would like to request ESDO's Executive Director, Madam Ms. Siddiqa Sultana, Madam.
Thank you, Samina. It is my privilege and honor to give my closing speech. Honorable Chief Guest, special guest, guest of honor, and respected session chair, panelists, guest speakers, and distinguished participants. Now is good evening. We are very much glad to have you today in our dialogue with moving towards a global plastic treaty in UNEA 5.2. We know the Bangladesh government has always taken an active role in previous sessions and will participate in the upcoming 5th UNEA Environment Assembly in 2022 to explore and discuss the possible solution for the environmental crisis Bangladesh is suffering, and reducing plastic pollution is the need of time. So as all our honorable guests and respected participants has discussed already, solo initiative cannot be that much fruitful unless we work together to combat the plastic pollution crisis. Along with the reduction of the plastic manufacturing, we must be aware of the transboundary movement of plastic waste, which is nowadays a crucial issue. As the developed countries send their waste to the developing countries who do not even have proper mechanism to handle their own waste. It's particularly alarming because Bangladesh is one of the most polluted countries in South Asia. The production of plastic has a substantial environmental impact. All of these are very well-known facts. So to solve this problem, global interventions are needed. And we believe that Bangladesh will not be alone in this call for a treaty on plastic pollution. Other countries will be in support of this agreement too. So finally, last but not the least, I would like to wholeheartedly thank you, our Honorable Minister of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Chief Guest of this session, Mr. Shahabuddin, Member of Parliament, for always being so positive towards tackling environmental issues. Our respected guest of honor, MD Moniruzzaman, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Environment and Forest, our honorable special guest, His Excellency, Mr. Itoi Naoki, Ambassador, Embassy of Japan in Bangladesh. Our respected session chair, Said Margu Morshed, sir, and also our respected panelists, Tim Grabil, David Ajoli, and also Steve, Professor Steve, and MG Jiaul Haq, Director of Department of Environment. So, and also our respected participants who made these sessions so enlightening. But we hope the treaty would not be a written document. It would be implemented for sake of our future generation to save the planet from plastic monster. No false solution, please. Thank you all. Thank you again. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much all. This is the end of our session. Thank you so much, our honorable chief guest, Mohammad Shahabuddin MP, sir. Thank you, sir, for being with us, and our ambassador, Ito
Thank you,
Nayaki,
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Sampai jauh di sana sakatnya kan.